Berman. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I apologize for being late. Thank you very much. Mayor, city commissioners, it's so great to see you and everyone from Lake Worth. So I think unless you've been living under a rock, you know what's going on in Tallahassee. Right, exactly. We did not do a budget, which is our one constitutional duty. So we've been called back, and we will be going back on June 1st. The call is for June 1st to June 20th, and hopefully we'll get a budget and we'll get the healthcare issue resolved. So my report today will focus not on the budget. We'll focus on the legislative issues that we passed that will affect all of you. And then if you want, I can come back and talk about the budget. I know there are some items for Lake Worth that are in the budget. There's some road improvements, there's some water projects, so hopefully we'll be able to come back and give a great report on those at the end of June. So I have such good news. I am so happy to report. We passed the Sober Homes Bill. And I have to give full credit. It was Representative Hager and Senator Clemens, and they got it through this year. And it will require DCF to create a voluntary certification program. Unfortunately, it is voluntary, but we did that because we wanted to be constitutional. And I've heard Representative Hager speak about it. He thinks it'll help about 85% of the problem. So this is a great first start. I mean, it's not the ultimate final solution, but for it's a good start. We're going to require people to register, so hopefully the good actors will stay in the system and the bad actors will leave the system. So that's one of the best things that happened this legislative session, and I told you all last year it was going to be my #1 goal, and and we got it, so I'm so happy.
Thank you.
Thanks. The second thing that I'm really happy to report is a bill that I actually sponsored, and it changes some of the designation for a property at 45th Street in Haverhill, a water catchment area, so that we can use that property for spring training for the Houston Astros and the Washington Nationals. So I'm really excited that passed. I think it's a great economic development bill for Palm Beach County, and it's going to help everyone. So that was a really wonderful piece of legislation that passed. Okay, so every year I come back and I report to you about things that will affect you as localities and city commissioners. So this year, the really good news is that because the House walked out 3 days early and ended session, lots of bills died. And a lot of the bills that died would have adversely affected you. So it's very good that these bills died. One of them, which you're probably aware of, has to do with addressing costs for relocation of utilities. That bill had a lot of support, and there's a lot of communities and cities and counties that are very concerned that it's going to be very expensive for you. So what my advice to you is that bill will probably come back, and the League of Cities and the League of Counties better take a really strong stand, because there was that bill passed pretty much overwhelmingly. So it's a good thing that it died, because you're going to have that's going to come up. Bills addressing septic systems died. The one issue that still could potentially come up, and that could be a problem for you all, has to do with proposed tax cuts. The House passed a $600 million tax cut, which included about $400 million for communication service tax, which is your phones, and a lot of that money does go to city localities. This year, the way the House version was passed, and there's no Senate version of it, they agreed to hold the cities and counties harmless, but that's only for this year. So what happens next year with the $400 million? Now that particular bill is one of the bills that is listed as possibly being discussed during the special session. The only things that can be discussed during the special session have to be specifically noticed, and that bill is part of the group that's going to be specifically noticed. So there could be some issues, and that's going to be the biggest bargaining chip between the House and the Senate. As you know, the Senate wants Medicaid expansion. They included money for lower income pool for hospitals. The House wants tax cuts. So those are going to be the two bargaining chips. Somewhere in between, we're going to see an answer. So that could potentially come about and affect you. But otherwise, it was good that things died because things won't affect you. In terms of education, finally, we passed a bill where there's less testing for our students. So that was really wonderful, and the governor signed it. So we're going to finally have less testing. Our students are just being tested to death, and this was a great thing. And also, as part of that same bill, a priority for Palm Beach County was to have discretion as to when school could start, because right now we had specific dates that school could start by. And now Palm Beach County has discretion, and I believe they set the start date at August 17th this year, which they would not have been allowed to without that bill, but they did do that. One bill that you should be aware of that did pass, that I personally have a lot of concerns about, has to do with guns in emergencies. Under this bill, which I anticipate that the governor will sign, I don't think he's signed it yet, within 48 hours after a state of emergency has been declared, people can walk around on the street with guns, regardless of whether they have a concealed permit or not for that gun. So that is, yeah. So that is very troubling. I voted against it, but it did pass. And there's no provision about what happens after 48 hours, I guess.
Quiet in the chambers, please.
Yeah. So
Quiet in the chambers, please.
I guess after 48 hours, you know, the people have to go home. It's got a lot of issues about what's going to happen with it. So that's a concern. And then the final issue that I wanted to discuss with you is Amendment 1, which was the amendment that was passed this year concerning the environment. So the amendment says that a certain percentage of our tax money, or for when you buy properties, has to go to environmental issues. So this year it's about $750 million. We have not, there's no resolution on this. Like everything else, it kind of all fell apart as the session fell apart. There was a big water bill that we had worked on in the House, that didn't get anywhere. I am concerned that what's happening with the Amendment 1 money is what happened with the lottery money, where it was supposed to be an extra and we're supposed to be doing all these wonderful things, and now instead we're going to be paying salaries and things like that. So we're watching that. Also, there's a concern about acquisition. The Amendment 1 specifically, the first item in the amendment was land acquisition, and yet there's been very little discussion about acquisition. Instead, there's been a lot of discussion about conservation, which is great. We do need to take care of the properties that we own, but I think we can balance that. So we're going to be watching, and we'll see what happens with that money. So that's pretty much my report. I'm happy to answer any questions. I love representing all of you, and it's my honor and privilege to be up here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner McWade?
I had a couple that came up, and thank you for taking the time to come and fill us in. Good to see you again. And thank you for supporting our efforts when Batch of Us came up, trying to get some money for the Park of Commerce. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Don't bargain that one with the other side. You mentioned that on the bill for the cost of utility relocation, that most cities and counties are concerned about it, and presumably, if they're aware, the residents of those would be also. But you also mentioned there was a big constituency for it. Who's in favor of it?
The utilities.
And presumably, utilities fall into two flavors: municipally owned, publicly owned ones, and investor owned ones. The municipally owned ones are presumably on the same side as the cities and counties.
I assume so. We didn't hear from them, but we heard from the investor-owned utilities, and they were very much.
Do you happen to know off the top of your head, the number that sticks in my head is that investor-owned utilities typically are getting about a 10% return?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I do know definitely AT&T was out there lobbying strongly. FP&L was lobbying, so those are the groups that you're going to be fighting against. But I think if the league and everybody gets together, and what happened was, I don't think people saw it coming, and I don't think there was a concerted effort together from the cities and counties. Now, if you do that, I think it could change the dynamics of it.
Okay, thank you on that one. So for the public, let AT&T, let your utilities, if they're investor-owned, know that you're not happy about that, because it would be basically a tax cost for us.
Right.
And on the proposed tax cuts, you mentioned that it was communication money. Is that money that the telecommunications folks pay as a tax, basically the franchise fees?
Yeah, it has to do with like your cell phone taxes and things like that on your, you know, how you have so many taxes on your cell phones. So that's what the money is pretty much, that's what they're talking about. And what they're talking about is they're hoping to give it back to people. You know, that's how they're framing it, is everybody will get, you know, like $20 off your cell phone bill or something.
Except the original intent of that was that that's a franchise fee for the utility, the telecommunications utility, to pay the cities for being able to put communication lines and towers and whatnot in their communities.
Yeah, I think so.
So
it's a, you know,
it's not really that you're getting it back.
Right.
Somebody's gonna have to pay those costs.
Right, that's why I said this year they're gonna hold you harmless. This year they will fill in that number, but there's no discussion of what happens in future years.
Two more. I think it's a great idea that when there is general chaos during an emergency, we should put the guns out there.
Right, exactly.
I don't know what they were thinking. That's amazing, amazing. Amendment 1, as many of you know, I worked for many years in Everglades Restoration, and there are many people, I don't remember what percentage that bill passed with around the state.
Over 75.
A very high percentage, and I think everybody understood that was a long-term investment in our state for public lands for acquisition.
I agree with you, I have no problem with it, but we'll be out there fighting, but we're getting a lot of resistance on that issue.
And the idea, you know, having worked for the Water Management District for a long time, the idea that they would take that publicly voted money for acquisition and use it to pay the already gutted state agencies, no, that's,
I agree.
yeah, fight back hard on that one. That's not what people were looking for.
Yeah, no.
Thank you for your efforts
Sure,
there.
sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Emerson.
Laura, do you remember the bill number for the restoration?
For which restoration?
The actual utility restoration?
I don't
Relocation.
remember- Yeah, I
Relocation.
don't remember the bill number
Okay,
right
I'll
now,
look it up.
I don't have that with me, yeah, sorry.
Any other questions? Right there.
I just want to go back to the sober home deal, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is the 85% figure based on the idea that the insurance companies will now use that as a carrot, if you will, to these operators? Say, look, if you don't sign up for this registry, we're not going to work with you. Is that kind of where we're going with this?
Absolutely.
And how do we, is there some way we can work directly with the insurance lobby to ensure that that's the case, work it backwards?
It's being done through DCF, they're setting up the credentialing, they're certifying the background screening of the employees, and then they're gonna only allow licensed service providers to refer residents to a recovery resident. So
Okay.
DCF supposedly is setting up the whole framework, I hope they're doing it, and we will push them to do it.
Follow up, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Well, I know the first time or the second time, or the cracks we've had of this, in the past, DCF has not really, in my humble opinion, bent over backwards to do what they were asked to do. Do you get the same sense that this may be the case going forward? Are they gonna have the funding to make this happen?
We will make sure, I personally have had issues with DCF in the past, also I will not disagree with you, there's been some real problems in the way DCF does things, but I think, you know, with all of us watching and making sure, we will make sure that this becomes a priority and that they have to do this. It's in the bill, and we will hold their feet to the fire. And, you know, we've got Senator Clemens, he's great, and we'll really work and make sure that they do what they said they're supposed to do.
Thank you again.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think a lot, what I found a lot when we were talking about that up in Tallahassee was that all the licensed facilities, all the people that have been doing this were supportive of it.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
we talked to a lot of people that were running, you know, rehabilitation centers and sober homes and whatnot that were doing it for a long time, had all different types of licensing and credentials and whatnot. They all said, hey, we're for this. Because I think that they started to see the need.
Right, well,
some
the
of
good
places.
the good actors want it, and
Right.
that's the whole idea, is by setting up this whole system, the good actors are gonna comply, and the bad actors are gonna not get any patients, and hopefully go out of business, which is what we would love to see happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, and I wanted to thank you also for my poster. It's hanging in my office, and I love it. And when the other cities come, I tell them, I shame them a little bit about how great the airport is. So thank you all. I
Oh,
appreciate it.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your hospitality. Thank you.